Just came back from a late night walk outside. It's brisk, otherwise it's cold. It didn't used to be cold. I didn't used to live in LA. Now it's cold. Hey everybody, welcome to Top 10 Tuesday. It is December 15th. I don't know why I always feel the need to burp right after I do that. So I worked from home today because Michelle and Logan are both still getting over the stomach flu. We had an incredibly rough night. Logan was sick and up most of the night. Michelle actually slept on the floor in his room. And it's one of those things where it was really frustrating, obviously, for her. She's not getting a lot of sleep. He's waking up every 10 minutes crying and then falling back asleep. But then there are these little tiny moments that kind of make it all worthwhile that get you through when he's reaching through the bars of his crib and just rubbing her hand like he's consoling her, you know, and that's how he falls asleep. I mean, those kind of sweet moments, you just can't, I don't know, you just can't stress the importance of those moments. But it's sad that they have to come at the price of him being really sick and her being sleep deprived and also sick. While she stayed there, I was on Liam duty, so I was getting up a couple times throughout the night to feed him and put him back down. Thankfully, Liam has not gotten the stomach flu. So far, I have not come down with it either, but the lack of sleep, the fighting off of other things has taken its toll, but I'm slowly getting past it, hoping if tonight goes well, to be back in the office. Actually, while you're watching this, I forgot to say this yesterday, that one of the other things I got for my birthday was from my brother. He got me a 1-year special plus membership to the Marvel Unlimited app, which has 17,000 comics digitized that you can read. They're in crystal clear quality. It's really awesome. And what's so great about this is I used to read comics a lot when I was a kid, but I haven't for a long time, and I've kind of been feeling the need and the want to get back into them. So this is kind of like a Netflix for Marvel Comics. They get the comics about 6 months after publication, I think. You know, they continually update what's going on in the new comics, but I think the best part about it is that you can look for a particular event. So like right now, I never read the Civil War saga that went through all of those Marvel titles and what's going on now in the Marvel movies. The next Captain America is called Civil War. And that's going to start a plot line that I never read. So I can go into this app and say, you know, browse by event, and I can pick the Civil War, and it will put in order all of the comics, all 101 comics that went through various titles, and it'll put them in order so that I can read the entire saga. And it's awesome. It's such a great way to read them all and to think that I don't have to go running around trying to buy and find all the different comics that took place in the Civil War saga. So after I finish reading that one, I'm going to move on to the Age of Apocalypse so I can get ready for the next X-Men movie. And it's not that I'm going to go in there and kind of nerd out saying, that's not the way it was, I just read that. I just want to know both sides of it to see what they changed, what they didn't. So I highly recommend it as a gift for anyone that you know that is into comics or used to be into comics and wants to get back into them. Oh, and my grandfather from New Jersey, he sent me cheese. From Wisconsin Cheese Club or something. It's so far really tasty. I've only tried one of them so far. I mean, there was like cheddar and Swiss and smoked Gouda and Colby and then Edam, which I've never had Edam cheese before, or Edam. And it was really good. It kind of had a mozzarella-y type of flavor to it. Very creamy. So that was cool. Yeah. That's about it for what's going on in the Stew House. Now on to the top 10 list. So this week's Top 10 Tuesday is Top 10 Podcasts. Now these are, of course, the podcasts that I listen to. There's hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, so this is by no means extensive, but I've tried out a number of others, and these are the 10 that I keep going back to. There's a crying child somewhere in my living room. Dear Hank and John. Hank and John Green, kind of godfathers of YouTube. This is them. This is them talking about random things. They're usually giving, as they say, dubious advice and giving small updates on what's going on in Mars, which is Hank Green's fascination, and AFC Wimbledon, which is a soccer club or football club that John Green is fascinated with and also co-sponsors part of their team through the Nerd Fighteria group. And it's a fun podcast. It's fun to hear them banter the way that they do, and also just kind of the advice they give. The emails that they receive and the letters that they receive asking for advice are very heartfelt. These are not just random things like, how do I make my turkey juicier on Thanksgiving? These are kids and adults trying to find themselves and figure ways out of some very complicated situations. And Hank and John treat that with the respect that it deserves, while also making the podcast very interesting. KCRW's Here Be Monsters. It is one of the most interesting podcasts I think that are out there. Every podcast is something incredibly unique. They took it on tour and they did this weird sound experiment. I wish I could have been there, but it is a very, very unique podcast, and sometimes it's not the best podcast to listen to in the car because it can have very sensitive elements of hearing that you really want to pick up on, so sometimes it's best listened to with headphones or earbuds. But trust me, you will not be bored by this. At the very least, you will be curious by the time each one is over. Now, this isn't exactly a podcast, but I'm really glad that they do it, which is the audio version of the Rachel Maddow show. So every show that she does the next day, the next morning, or even later that night, you can download that exact show, the audio form. So I get to listen to her show on the way to work if I really want to, or I can listen to yesterday's show on the way home. It's an awesome thing for someone who's a big fan of the show and just doesn't get a chance to watch it anymore. Next, the Nerdist podcast. Anyone who knows Chris Hardwick, not necessarily in person, but knows the work of Chris Hardwick, has seen him on At Midnight, has seen his stand-up specials, has seen other things that he's done. He's an amazing entertainer all around. And this podcast also shows that he's an amazing interviewer. He can really kind of get underneath the surface of when people are coming through doing their publicity tours or doing whatever it is that they're doing, and they usually come in and they just they're ready for those force-fed questions about like, how did you feel inspired by this, or what made you want to do this? Chris doesn't do that. It's kind of like the interviews that he does on the Nerds podcast are very informal. They're very like somebody just coming in and sitting down with their friends and going like, hey, what's up? Let's shoot the shit. And that allows the guests to really let loose, to really kind of give you some sense of their personality, which is super fun. And his co-hosts are awesome, but they do put out a ton of content. So if you've already got a bunch of podcasts that you're subscribed to, this one is going to start filling it up if you don't keep up with it. Not Too Deep with Grace Helbig. Now, this is a fun podcast for those people who are into YouTube, not just because Grace is a really fun entertainer, but also she brings on other people from YouTube. And she tries to make sure that it's a fun podcast, going, of course, by the name Not Too Deep. She doesn't want to get into super serious things. This doesn't get into hugely deep spiritual or emotional things. She tries to keep it incredibly light, incredibly silly, and they also always play games, so there's a video component to these challenges, at least in the first season. So it's always good for a giggle and for a routine question that she asks every guest. Give her their worst pants-shitting story in 3 words or phrases. Trust me, that part can really surprise you. Next, the SourceFed podcast. Now, I know Philip DeFranco has just released his podcast. I haven't started listening to that yet, so maybe that would be paired up with this. But this is, of course, usually 4 people from the SourceFed family. Sometimes they have guests, and it's just them talking, usually for about an hour or more. So this is a long podcast, but it can be really interesting. And you really get to hear that banter between people who, many of them actually live together and are really good friends and coworkers. So there's a natural flow of the conversation. I can't believe I just said the flow. That's a shameless plug. Tell you why at the end. Next, welcome to our podcast. This is Mike Falzone's podcast with his fiance, and as I've mentioned before, he's one of my favorite YouTubers. The dryness of his comedy, plus his advice, plus his kind of life observations, super good. And the podcast is just as good as his videos. Just longer. Now there comes the top 3. The other ones weren't in any sort of order, but these three are definitely what I would say my favorite. First, welcome to Night Vale. This is such an amazing story, and I would recommend, if you want to start listening to it, don't just go and listen to the latest episode. Go all the way back to episode 1 and start listening from there, because it is a continual story, and it's just about this weird town called Night Vale where weird things happen. It is the most unusual place in the physical and paranormal sense of the word, and it's so odd and so humorous. There's really no way to fully explain it other than go listen to it and beware. 2, Snap Judgment. This is spoken word and storytelling, as they say, with a beat. It is awesome. It is incredibly well produced, and these stories are just so amazing. Many of them, almost all of them, are true stories from the real people who lived them, and they will just blow your mind about the lengths that these people have gone to. Oh, my battery's about to die. So definitely check that one out. And if you can, find the episode where they talk to L. Ron Hubbard's grandson. It is amazing. And then lastly, Serial. Now, I know this one got super popular and it might seem like I'm just jumping on the bandwagon, but it is amazingly good storytelling and reporting and journalism all wrapped together in a narrative form with real life, which makes it incredibly energizing and inspiring and also intense. And of course, it's a different story each season. Adnan Syed's case from the first one actually now is back in court, and now she's talking about Bo Bergdahl. Incredible. Definitely check it out. Oh, and before my battery pack dies, the reason why I said it was a pun that I had actually mentioned the flow was because a friend of mine and I and another friend of mine had a podcast for a little while. We kind of did a test first season. We might be coming back to it at some point in the near future, called The Flow of Things, where we just kind of had every 10 minutes we would switch topics. So a little alarm would go off and we'd just switch to something new so that we could keep the flow of conversation going. So anyway, those are my top 10 podcasts. If you've got podcasts you think I should listen to, go ahead and list them in the comments down below. Thanks for watching Top 10 Tuesday this week. Hope you guys have a great Tuesday, and I will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, be good to each other.